Welcome, Life Sciences. Welcome to another exciting life science lesson. We are looking at this concept of what a cell is. And we've looked at the cell. All living things are made up of these cells. And today we're looking at I find it sometimes a confusing, part of the work. We're looking at a thing called organelles. So when I say thing, what do I mean by that? When we're looking at the cell, and we're going to recap a little bit of what we looked at, the cell needs to perform certain functions. And basically what an organelle means is a little organ. And that's what it is. It's something inside the cell that is going to perform a specific function. And very often people get confused between the concept of what is a tissue, what is a cell, what is an organelle. All right, and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to clarify those misconceptions. Guys, when we look at this whole concept, all right, I want to also notice when we look at this organelle, we're looking at, again, plant and animal cells. There are a lot of new words that you have to learn. We're going to start literally, when I'm looking at organelles, we're going to start to label the cell, if I was to say that. And the words are actually not that, they're quite difficult. They're not that easy. So make sure that, we understand how do I pronounce it, how do I say it, right? What does it mean, what does it do? Because the words, if it tends to be quite long, we tend to forget it, and that's obviously going to cause some confusion. Okay, so what are we looking at? We're looking at this concept that all living things are made up of cells. All right, so if I had to draw something, right, you'll see I've got this little shape, this unicellular one-cell thing, and as we looked at it last time, all right, they need to perform all living characteristics. And we discussed, all right, that acronym Mrs. Greef. So all living things, whether they are one single cell or a lot of cells, need to be able to move, respire, grow, reproduce, etc. Now, with the development, and this has been so awesome, right, is I'm going to show you a lot of pictures now. With the development of the microscope, with technology, right, we are now able to see these tiny, tiny little structures. And with us being able to see them, we actually have this much greater understanding of how a cell works, and how a cell works means we're going to understand how living organisms are going to work. So what did we look at last time when we looked at this whole concept of what a prokaryotic and a eukaryotic cell? And this is going to have a big influence of what we're going to look at in this lesson. So when we look at the history of the cell, basically, this is the most basic of all cells, and it's the oldest. Right, so we're looking at this prokaryotic cell, and when we come to the differences of the two, the differences is very much in the organelles. Okay, so when we look at it, we notice a prokaryotic is smaller than a eukaryotic, but if we look at what is inside the cell, and that's what I'm going to keep on reminding you, organelles are inside the cell. I'm going to start right here we go. If I just start lining them up, do you see what I'm doing? I've got quite a few that I can circle. However, if I look at the prokaryotic cell, I'm going to maybe circle one. Doesn't mean they have these organelles, right? But the prokaryotic cell doesn't have as much. And all of these, right, when it comes to an organelle, very important, and we looked at the concept last time, the organelles are surrounded by a membrane. And if we look at this prokaryotic one over here, it has an organelle, but it's the one exception to the rule. It doesn't have, all right, a membrane. just going to put it there, and we're going to have a look at that further on. Okay, so what basic concept did we look at? When we have a cell, all right, we said there is this enclosure. We have to keep it in place. And whether you are a plant cell, an animal cell, a prokaryotic cell, or a eukaryotic cell, all cells have a cell membrane. And that was that whole fluid mosaic model that we looked at, and that phospholipid bilayer. Right? It is fluid, and it controls what comes in and out of the cell. The second thing we looked at was this concept of cytoplasm. And cytoplasm is water, and in that water, we've got things dissolved in there. And I said to you, you must think of the concept of jelly, okay? Things dissolved in there, you can't really see them. Jelly also can hold things in. I can put things in, and it can hold its shape. Then we looked at the next concept, and that concept was the beginning of what we looked at an organelle. We are looking at eukaryotic cells, and all our eukaryotic cells have this organelle that is called the nucleus. Now, if I'm going to just quickly go back here, we're going to look at the nucleus just briefly again, but what it is it's a structure, it has a membrane, and it's inside the cell. That's what I want to keep on reminding you, that it's inside the cell. It's something smaller than the cell, and it's going to work inside the cell. Okay, so what we're going to look at now is we're going throughout the session, we're going to look at the different organelles. We're going to see what possibly could be in a cell. Now, I need you to understand this very important concept. Structure versus function. Not every single cell might have the same organelle. It depends on what it does. So the organelle, what does it do? All right, do all cells need it, etc. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the top over here. I've just put in a diagram with a few of most of the organelles that you're going to come across. And as I said to you, the most important thing is each of these have a specific function. So they're going to lead us to that Mrs. Greef. Each and every one of these that are up over here, they play a specific role, and I'm going to write it one more time, inside the cell. So whatever the cell is able to do, that is going to be what is going to be necessary. So when we come to a eukaryotic cell, our eukaryotic cell had to do more, all right? And because it has to do more, it needs to have these structures which enable it to do more. Now, each of these, it's quite important that you understand that they have their own membrane, okay? And it's the same structure as a cell membrane. The only organelle that does not have a membrane, right, is a ribosome. And that is why we find ribosomes in prokaryotic cells. A ribosome is the difference, the outsider to this rule that we are going to look at. Okay, the next concept that we looked at was this animal cell and a plant cell. Now, as I said to you, if we look at this concept of structure versus function, here we're going to see that there is a difference. Why? One of the things that plant cells can do is they can photosynthesize. So they are going to make their own food. An animal cell cannot do that. So what are we going to look at? We're going to see things or organelles inside the plant cell that an animal cell is not going to have. And vice versa. We're going to see certain structures that are going to be in the animal cell that might not necessarily be in the plant cell. So, and that is important because you need to understand what is the difference between a plant and what is the difference between an animal cell. And that is going to be how its structure, all right, and the things that are inside of it. The lesson that we might have done previously, we looked at cell boundaries, and we already see that a cell, plant cell, has a cell wall, right? This concept, it needed more structure because it doesn't have like the skeleton. So we're going to see that it has that structure. Okay, guys, so we looked at this whole concept. I'm not going to briefly go through it. As we said, of the nucleus. That was the last lesson. We looked at this organelle. It's the most important organelle. You see here's the membrane, right? And then all the things inside it. We're going to have now concentrate on what is outside of it. Now, the first one we are going to look at, I just want to go over here. The first organelle that we're going to look at, other than the nucleus, that both a plant and an animal cell, is going to be this mitochondria. All right? It's a bit of a difficult, all right, word to sometimes say, mitochondria. But what the mitochondria does here, guys, it's the powerhouse of the cell. And what do we mean by that? The mitochondria, when I eat food, the food is going to come into this little organelle in my cell, and I'm going to untrap the food, and I am going to make energy. Okay? What does the mitochondria do? It undergoes cellular respiration. And what is that? Remember, that's one of my things of living characteristics. It's one of my R's. So this organelle, very important. If I don't have this organelle, then I can't make energy. If I can't make energy, my body doesn't work. Now, if we have a look at this diagram, it's very often we draw it, it always looks like a worm, right? Looks like that. Here is what it looks like underneath, right, a microscope. This is actually what it looks like. And basically what we have, one membrane, it's a membrane-bound structure, and inside here, it has another membrane. And that membrane is made up in these folds called cristae. And basically what it does is it increases the surface area. And what do I need to increase the surface area for? Because the larger the surface area, more cellular respiration, the more ATP. Now, if you're studying this diagram very carefully, you're going to see something quite unusual. The mitochondria have its own DNA. It's called mitochondrial DNA. And very often when we look at the concept of evolution, we're going to see how mitochondrial DNA plays a role in how we can look at the history of time of what it's going. So mitochondrial DNA, and moms pass it on to their children. Dads don't pass it on at all. So guys, this is the concept of cellular respiration. The glucose, the food that you eat, your body needs oxygen, and here we go. We give off this energy. If we don't have energy, our body can't do any work. Okay, guys, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.